charge. This guy pays $5. And I go, that's my own. You'd win. Yeah, just one. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Thanks. And that'll show up on the screen?
Good evening. The Jail Law Enforcement Courts Committee meeting is called to order. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So approved. So moved.
Is there a motion? Is there a second? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item number 3 is the juvenile detention report. Director Collins.
Good evening.
Good evening.
There's really nothing, not a lot for me to say. I'll just answer your questions if you have any.
Justice Harbison.
Okay, in the last couple of months, we've seen an increase in detentions, and so we have Judge Zimmerman here, and maybe she could comment as to why there is this increase and what we can do to decrease it. So that's, are we gonna have to start looking at enlarging the juvenile detention center? Is this down the road, or can we do some more alternative programs? That's my concern.
Well, as I explained to you earlier, to me, it's based on the crimes that are being committed. But yes, I will let Judge Zimmerman, I'll let Judge Zimmerman answer more of that question as well.
Okay. So I just wanted to go over a few things about this report and the report last month. If you'll recall, and some of you may be new to the Quorum Court, back in 2013, I asked to start JDAI, Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative, which is a nationwide initiative with model sites across the country to look at who are we detaining kids that need to be in detention, and to do it objectively. So before that time, the juvenile law says that before a juvenile goes into detention and they're arrested, unlike the adult system where the officer arrests the person and takes them to jail, the juvenile code says that one of our juvenile court officers, not JDC, but one of our juvenile court officers, will then look at what is going on with that juvenile and have an independent, objective risk assessment. We call it a RAI, a risk assessment instrument, to determine before that kid even goes to detention, they're out in the field, the officer's getting ready to arrest them. Before that officer can bring the kid to JDC to detain them, they have to have a risk assessment instrument, and the juvenile court officer has to say, yes, they're gonna go to detention, or no, and here's your court date. So unlike the adult system, we are already going through the process of looking at, in the very beginning, before they get to detention, if this is a juvenile who needs to be detained. So we do a risk assessment on every kid. One of our juvenile court officers has the phone 24/7. So if the officer arrests a kid at 3 a.m., our officer through juvenile court takes that call, gets the risk assessment out. It looks at previous history. Are they on probation? Is this a violent offense? Is this a gun offense? If it's a gun offense, the state law says that juvenile goes to detention. If you have 50 people in detention, too bad, so sad, the law says they go to detention. So a lot of these numbers that we see an increase on are due to gun offenses. Secondly, once the juvenile court officer says to detain, at that point in time, they come to detention, and we have a detention hearing. By law, it has to be within 72 hours, not counting holidays or weekends, where we have to have a detention hearing. I hold detention hearings 4 days a week. Doesn't matter if you're from Madison County and you get arrested, you go to detention. We're going to have your detention hearing on Monday morning, Tuesday morning, Thursday morning, or Friday morning to get kids in front of me, to get the ones that need to be out of detention, give them rules, give them an ankle monitor. We have our diversion programs, the ankle monitor to keep them out of detention. We also have our youth reporting center, which keeps kids in detention, primarily medium to high-risk kids who are already on probation. And if you look at our numbers, some of our higher numbers are due to revocation of probation. These are kids who've already been on probation and they're back in detention. Well, we just didn't stick them in there because they are skipping school or whatever. We have triaged those kids. Maybe we give them an ankle monitor. Maybe we have them go to the youth reporting center, which is down in Springdale, where they go after school. So we already have diversion programs to weed out these kids to keep them out of detention. So our numbers, when you think about it, over 2,000 kids were either cited or arrested last year in Washington County. So when you look at these numbers, they're higher than they were last year. It's a cyclical thing. I can tell you that we've had more kids in stolen cars going on high-speed chases throughout our communities that have loaded guns. We have had more kids that have violent offenses. So when it's cyclical, like in January or maybe December, we didn't have as many kids. So do we need a bigger JDC? No, we don't. Right now, I think that our program is working, but you need to understand that we are looking at these kids before they even enter into JDC. The other thing you need to be aware of is that once a juvenile is charged as an adult, so when they first come see me, they're arrested for something, the prosecutor says, we're going to go adult. Well, they haven't filed on them yet. They're going to go to detention right out of the chute. Once they are in detention and the prosecutor files on them as an adult, they're taken to the jail, booked into the jail, they come back to JDC. Because we want juveniles that are filed on as adults to be at our JDC and not at the jail. So some of those numbers, not only are you going to see about 6 kids that are filed on as adults, once they're filed on adults, they're not having a trial within 60 days like they are in juvenile court. When we have a kid that's detained and we're waiting on a trial, it's rare that I'll go past 60 days keeping them in detention for their trial. Once they're transferred to adult, they may sit in detention 6 months, 7 months, longer than that, waiting for the adult case to be heard, because there's a lot of discovery, there's a lot of evidence, and so those kids are also counted in our numbers. Those are the kids that are filed on as adults, booked into the jail, but they're housed at JDC. Those kids have to be separated from the kids that are filed on as juveniles. So you have all these different parts moving around, and the numbers, when you look at it and you think how much our population is, that every juvenile that gets arrested comes through JDC, we're going to have a lot some months, sometimes less than that. So as far as diversion programs, I'm one person. My staff is, one team, and we're trying really hard to keep the kids out of detention that don't need to be here with these objective risk assessment tools that we've been using now for the last 10 or 20 years. Long answer, Miss Ann, so sorry.
Thank you very much. But, I think it explains the increase in detention, that we have guns involved, and that's not a decision that you make. That's a decision that's been made by the state. If a gun's involved, then they're put in detention.
Well, a high-speed chase. That's
Well-
not a mandatory detention. Well, I'm going to look at case by case whether or not this juvenile needs to be in detention. And Norma Frisbee and I, when we're at 36, every night before we leave, we go through that list and say, okay, Johnny's going to get out in 3 days. Maybe we can go ahead and have him get out early. Or she'll call me in the middle of the night, Judge, we're at 40. Who can we let out? So I get up and we go through the list together. We do that, on a constant basis to try to keep the kids to where it needs to be. But if there are kids that are a danger to society and I've sentenced them to time, they're going to be in detention. So we try to be mindful of that and balance who's in there with the protection of society.
Thank you.
Okay, more than you wanted, I'm so sorry. Okay, any other questions? Are you so excited? Okay. Yes, sir.
I just want to say thank you for your hard work.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking care of the kids.
Okay, thank you.
I know your heart's in it.
Okay.
I do have a question, just, your diversion program, are the parents still required to take parenting classes with their juvenile who is in the diversion program? Are you still doing that part of it?
We have the Creating Lasting Family Connections, which
Okay.
it tracks with the kid and the parents doing parenting. Then I also order pretty much standard in my FINS cases and my delinquency cases. If the parents need parenting, I'm ordering it through the Jones Center or through churches.
Right.
So we're trying to get services to these kids early before they come see us to keep them out. And last year, we had 1,600 citations where a police officer gave them a citation for a misdemeanor or a felony case. And of those 1,600 cases, we diverted 633 of those citations. They never came to court. They got a warning, they worked with my diversion officer, they did fine. We never even saw those kids.
That's great.
So
That program is working.
it's really working. We got a lot of kids.
Thank
Come
you.
see court. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Judge Zimmerman. Item number 4, the Sheriff's Office reports, the Enforcement Activity Report, Chief Deputy Cantrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The enforcement reports, nothing out of the ordinary really to report. Calls for service up a little bit over last year, but nothing that gives us much concern. Animal calls are up a little bit, but population's growing in the county, so it's still our largest call volume is animal calls. We answer more animal calls than any other kind of call, as far as all the different types. So it's a big thing, a big part of what we do. But I'll be happy to answer any questions about the enforcement report.
Any questions?
Real
Judge?
quick, I'm curious, the animal calls that you have, are they rabid animals, or are they the vicious animals?
Dog bites, strays, loose dogs, digging in the trash, just an assortment of
Doing what dogs do?
Yeah, and cats
Okay.
and cows out, and horses on the neighbor's property, stuff like that.
Have you seen a decline in the vicious dogs attacks that we saw, I guess, a couple of years ago?
It's a really uncommon occurrence to have a vicious animal complaint. So
Okay.
we don't get many of those. It's a pretty low frequency event.
That's good. That's good to hear that. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Major Densler.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. I'll leave my paperwork out here and see if I can get my numbers in order. Our overall numbers are down just a little bit right now. I don't know for really what reason. Mainly the U.S. Marshals and some of the prisoners going to ADC. They've called for 2 or 3 loads of them here in the last 2 or 3 weeks. But our intakes are still gaining. A little bit each month, and everything else is, you can see, has about the same. I know Madison County, I don't know if it had anything to do with there's an article in the paper about they got their bill, but we had 37. I think we're down to 23 today. So that helped. So that's part of our numbers going back down to You know, snapshot about 4 o'clock was 714.
714?
Yes. Where we was up over 800 a month ago.
So you've dropped
Just
almost 100?
Almost. But I mean, a lot of it's just because, like I say, the Arkansas Department of Corrections called, you know, they want 20 a load. The marshals have sent a bunch onto their prison, so it's not anything you can bet on. It's just the way things all fell out this month.
Okay. Questions?
Over here.
Justice Harbison.
How many do we have sleeping on the floor tonight?
85.
Justice Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I read an article today about the pressures on prisons and jails with the coronavirus, and I know we haven't had any cases in Arkansas, but I'm wondering if there's anything in sort of inmate standards that help you all deal with something like that, because I think about just sort of the close proximity that everyone's in and people in and out, and I just think it's good to sort of think about those things ahead of time, and I wondered if there was sort of guidance in existence already for how you all would deal with some kind of outbreak like that.
Well, our food service has already sent out their, you know, what they would do, same way with our medical. But, you know, we're always worried about, like I say, the close proximity, even of a common cold. And a lot of the chemicals we buy, sometimes we can get scrutinized about what they cost. But, you know, our worst fear usually is staph or MRSA. And we got our bottles out and started reading on them. And this is already working on this. We were surprised. I mean, way down the list there, here the coronavirus is. So we've always been clean. You know, we full-time clean. And just to try to have no staff, no, you know, like I say, MRSA is the worst fear you get in your jail. And like you say, what you'd have to do to move people and get people away from it, and quarantine it, it'd be, you know, it's a nightmare. So that's one reason why we use the chemicals we do to full-time clean with.
Well, I guess we need to start thinking about that in all aspects of the county just because of the nature of the public facilities, but never fear, J.P. Madison brought her spray bottle with disinfectant in it for anybody.
She's ready.
Okay, well, I don't mean to make light of it. I just think it's something that we all probably need to think about because it's likely inevitable
Yes, ma'am.
that there's an Arkansas case and we have to deal with it. So thank you for what you do.
Here we go.
Justice Harbison.
It's on.
It's on. Do you keep track of the number of fights that occur in the jail?
We've got some rough statistics. Some of our standards, some of our reports we have to find. They want to know the fights with detainee on detainee, officer on detainee, that kind of thing. Yes.
Do you keep that record?
Yes, we would have to go probably manually pull it, but yes, we do.
All right, because I've had 2 complaints in the last week of number of fights in the jail. Well, if we're overcrowded, you know, that can be one of the things that can happen. All right, I just wondered if we kept a record of it. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
What are our pre-trial numbers versus total bed count?
On our chart here, they're still going up. Our pretrial was about 425. You know, we was real lucky keeping them around 400, but at 4 o'clock they was 422. But a little bit of the scary part about that is where it shows I think on our last page, our monthly bookings where, you know, how many people we turn loose. And the last month we turned loose 189 through us and others through the judge's orders and everything else. But anyway, brought that count to 290. You know, I used to say 100, 150, 200 was our average for quite a while. And this last month we was up to 290. So everything's they're still coming in. I mean, that's you know, the pretrial. That's why is the number still the same, if not a little higher. Like I say, our releases for the feds and the state is what's brought the number back down.
You done? You want to talk some more?
Other questions? Thank you, sir. Item number 5, the Ombudsman Report. Dr. Adelman, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Quorum Court Committee. Just want to touch on a few things regarding my report for the last month. I think we have a pretty significant report coming up for next month, as I've previewed in my report. First of all, apologies for not getting things out in time for the mailing, but I think you all have copies, and also you can scroll down on the screen for just the high points. Statistically, we're kind of continuing as we have month by month, and in terms of bed days saved, that's been following, again, the pattern there. We have now a total since September of bed days saved. This is an estimate of 773 bed days saved for the county, and that's pretty much the same statistic that the Sheriff's Department refers to board days. We different name, same measure, same count. And budget-wise, I want to address this because I'll be coming back to this again next month, when I think the time will be ripe for this committee and the full Quorum Court to decide where the Quorum Court wants to go as a whole with the future of the Ombudsman project. If you can scroll to the second page, ma'am. Yeah. Somewhat to my surprise, the original appropriation, if you recall, was $15,000. My original guess was that right about now we'd be running dry. Well, Matt Durrett tells me I'm a cheap date, but we're coming in under that, which means that we've got enough of that original $15,000 appropriation probably to take us through spring and part of the summer. Now comes the summer, school is out, I will be losing my valued assistant, so we're probably going to be going into sort of maybe a power down, if you call that, configuration, but happening at more or less the same time on the same track that we're very much looking forward to is the upcoming report later this spring. I believe it's May or June, of the National Center for State Courts, which I think is going to have a big impact on everything. I have sat down with their staff as well and given them my monthly reports. They have our input, and I think their input to the Quorum Court as a whole, I think will be very significant in terms of recommendations for efficiencies. I made a recommendation in my last month's report, which actually I pretty much knew was going to get swamped by the two ordinances passed last month, recommending, and I take no position on it, recommending that the county reopen its agreement with the feds, and as far as taking in their detainees and other detainees. Again, that was really the big news from last month, which kind of left behind, if you will, my somewhat detailed and somewhat, I'll say, pointed recommendation about FTAs, FTA bails, and the pretty shocking spreadsheet that my assistant prepared about the prevalence of bonds that are set for FTAs that exceed $100,000, way beyond the person's ability to pay, and way beyond, frankly, in many instances, pretty much a fair assessment of how dangerous or not dangerous that person is. What I said last month is that if we could come to a meeting of the minds all across the board, if we can come to the meeting on the minds on some more efficient, better way to handle FTAs than setting 100 or 100,000 plus bonds, and then they sit there. I indelicately use the term buried alive. Persons who sit there for 4 months or so on a bond that they can't make, that is pretty much by design a bond that's going to keep them in jail, induce them to plead guilty. I'm trying to find a way we can all agree to, if you want to say, build a better mousetrap. I have sat down with Matt Durrett and with Sheriff Helder with the goal of, again, in a collaborative way, sitting down with the judges of the circuit court, hopefully bringing in a member or two of this committee, so we can have pretty much all quarters represented. And again, I'll have a much fuller set of recommendations to make next month regarding alternatives to again, that buried alive paradigm. Ankle monitoring, house arrest, prioritizing jail cases. These are all things I've talked about before, but kind of we're in a sense kind of laying low till next month, when I think we'll be able to make hopefully some agreed upon recommendations. But right now, that spreadsheet that attached to my last report had over 100 people in the jail on high bonds that they cannot make, and that the crimes do not themselves reflect dangerousness. Also on the top of page 2, since September, we have seen, by our standards, people can disagree with that, only a handful, only 6 people whose charges really reflect a serious risk to public safety. Now, you can say, and I wouldn't quarrel with anybody, that anybody who's arrested, even for a simple possession charge, is a threat to public safety. What we are prioritizing is persons who have a likelihood of committing violent acts. So I'm looking forward to the National Center's reporting, and I've sat down with them, and the representative I met with last month asked me a question that kind of took me by surprise, but I was glad to hear it, and something I hadn't thought of. She asked, as part of our assessment, my students and myself, are we using any statistically validated assessment tools? And honestly, I hadn't thought of it, and I would love to see get some learning on that. We come in on a basis of experience and what's on the face of the charges, so we can probably also benefit from some of the learning that the National Center will have to provide for us. So again, we're kind of in a steady state right now. Next month, again, I think will be the month that we all, I include myself in your deliberations, kind of decide where we're going. We will have, again, funding from the original 15,000 allocation to keep us going for some time further. Let me just add one other thing to the mix here. Actually, JP, Sue Madison asked me about a couple of people who have outstanding warrants, and I have a couple of points of reference here. We have found unscientifically, kind of, if somebody wants to clear up an FTA, kind of, I would call it very roughly, sort of scattershot. Some people call and get the right clerk on the right day, and they're told, come in, you can clear it up. And some people are told they're to be prepared to go into jail on that and have a further bond set. But from J.P. Madison's recounting, calling West Fork, I think, was very, very sympathetic. The court there was amenable. The court clerk was amenable to people coming in and clearing up their warrants. In Oklahoma City, where I've been spending some time, there are signs all around the city at crisis center, homeless shelters, police departments. You have a warrant, you want to clear it up, here's the number to call. And all I'm saying here, and I'll leave you with that, is that it would be, I think, well to have a sort of a consistent procedure or set of procedures. Somebody an FTA failed to appear for good reason, for bad reason, what do you do if you want to turn yourself in on that? And again, we're getting such a welter of different stories from people who have experienced that. So that's my report for now. Again, I think next month will be a more detailed report for you and for the full Quorum Court to assess what you think the best contribution, if any, from the Ombudsman Project can be. Thank you. I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Justice Harbison.
Just want to make a comment that West Fork is very accommodating on FTAs because I had a farm worker, one showed up he didn't even know about, went down there and took care of it and set the court date, and it was the next week. Everything went fine. It was taken care of, and he was sure he was going to jail. I couldn't promise him he was not going to jail, but I said, we do have to go and take care of this. So I just want to emphasize that West Fork is very accommodating. Thank you.
And again, that's not to say that Fayetteville or the circuit court here is unaccommodating. Again, it just appears to be somewhat haphazard and could benefit from kind of a consistent set of procedures.
Justice Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the type of program or guidelines or something you're talking about for handling FTAs, like what you've experienced in Oklahoma City, who initiates that? Is that something that initiates with the prosecutor, because it strikes me that it would come from the judicial branch.
To the best of my understanding, it's straight out of the court's office, the clerk of court.
Okay.
To come in on a warrant. And I don't think there's a flat-out promise you'll be able to go home, but people are encouraged to come in, and I think there's positive experience there.
Well, I had a friend whose son had gotten into some drugs and had failed to appear, and he got himself a job and was ready to clean up, and he was ready to clear up his warrants, and he just got stuck at the jail. It was like he went to turn himself in, and he just couldn't get back out. It was like his mom had to go hire a lawyer to be able to try to get him out. But, he sat down in Washington County for a really long time, and it was only because his employer sort of knew that he was trying to clean up his act and that they held the job open for him. But he was down there for several weeks. And it just seemed like, and I know the track that he's been on since then, where he's doing well, it's frustrating that he got stuck down there for as long as he did.
And some people who are in our jail who have other holds, again, it's kind of scattershot. Somebody might have a hold out of Rogers Police Department, or have an FTA out of Benton County. Some of them, and the people in the jail staff will they know what it's like on the street. If some people, they'll say, if we bond them out, if the Ombudsman Project or the Bail Project bonds them out, some people will say, well, we're just going to have to turn them over to Benton County. And some will say, no, Rogers will walk them out. Again, kind of consistency and kind of certainty is something that'd be very helpful here.
Well, and I don't know, I don't mean to suggest that it was something with our jail holding him. It was just sort of the whole process. It was the bond, and I think he did have an issue out of Benton County, and that was one of the things, was when he was ready to turn himself in, he was like, where do I go? Do I go to Benton County or do I go to Washington County? And he opted to go to Washington County because it was closer to his mom, and then we're like, maybe you would have gotten out better sooner if you went to Benton County, because of just trying to deal with all this, and it really becomes difficult for people to navigate.
Yeah. All I can say, and no criticism of anybody implied, is that it does seem to be kind of haphazard, scattershot, case by case. We will make an inquiry, and either somebody will be encouraged to bond out, and they'll be able to cite out on their pending charges, and some people know. So we want to kind of get a better systematic handle on that.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Dr. Allen.
Thank you.
Item number 6 on the agenda, the Washington County Criminal Justice Work Group report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll present this on Sheriff Helder's behalf. He's out tonight. We met February 14th down at the sheriff's office. Had a discussion with Mike Parker, area supervisor with probation and parole, and he explained to us about how parole works and how people get violated, and then the different classifications of parole, the Act 570 people, the 90-day people, and then the people that are actually parole violated and go back to prison. So we had a lot of discussion about that, and he explained it very well. And he says that for the most part, people that get parole violated are because they get parole violated and go back to prison, or because they have picked up additional charges. The technical violations are short-term, the Act 570 thing. So good discussion with him. We had Greg Parrish with the State Public Defender's Coordinator's Office was there, and he discussed that he's contemplating putting a public defender out of his office, out of the Little Rock office, at the jail. So we've looked at trying to squeeze some office space out for this public defender that would be assigned to the jail if he decides to go through with that. And then he would, this lawyer would primarily work with people that are incarcerated and try to speed their court dates up if they weren't able to get out, and kind of expedite that whole process. So hopeful that that will come to fruition. But that was the gist of our meeting. So meet again this Friday, March the 13th, down at the sheriff's office for a regular monthly meeting.
Thank you. Questions? Justice Harbison.
On the public defender that will be put at the jail, will this be under, will he be under the Washington County Public Defender, or will he be under the state?
Well, he says he's got 2 positions that he has not assigned out through the state, and I believe one of these will be one of those 2 positions.
So he'll be under state.
So he'll be under a state. He'll be a public defender, but under Greg's tutelage. And I suppose that he'll answer to Denny Highslip up here at Washington County. But
So what's Greg's last name?
Parrish, Greg Parrish.
Oh, okay. Is he from Westport? Winslow?
He used to be a public defender. I think he worked up here some.
Oh, okay.
But he's down at Little Rock and kind of over that commission now.
Other questions? Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
Mr. Chairman.
Hey, got a question over there.
Justice Deacons.
Mr. Chairman, this isn't really a question, but there's 2 things I would like to maybe inquire about for our agenda next month. One, I would like an update from the Public Defender's Office on the hiring of their additional positions. And 2, I would like to work with, I've mentioned this to Prosecutor Durrett, but I'd like to work on some sort of metrics that we could start looking at as when these lawyers hit the ground, what kind of difference they're making, impact. And I'd like to work with him to see what metrics would be fair to review there. I don't want to impose any metrics, but something that we could work together and look at. I'd appreciate that.
You want a way to measure the additional employees we hired?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? We're now at the public comment period. We have a 12-minute period for public comment. Would each of you please limit your comments to 3 minutes?
Hi, Sarah Bohr from Fayetteville. I had the pleasure and privilege of getting to go to Little Rock and attend part of the Jail Resource Day that was put together by the state, by the DFA, Sterling Penix, in conjunction with the, the extension offices of the University of Arkansas. And I just wanted to tell you some of the things I heard because I was excited about some of the programs that were shared. One of the things that I thought was really interesting that was brought up during this set of meetings, and I'll send you guys on your email what the day looked like. You're looking at me puzzled that you didn't know this took place, maybe. But they had a really robust agenda of sharing that happened anywhere from the Pulaski County Sheriff shared what was happening with reentry efforts in his area. We had somebody from the Department of Corrections, I think it was a mental health person that actually spoke about rehabilitation and treatment practices in the correction system. You had the PACT project peer advisory, Jimmy McGill, spoke. He actually, I think he's had around 19 felonies. He's like the first felon employee with the state of Arkansas, talking about peer recovery and how effective that programming is. So I'll share with you guys what the agenda was, and I've got a summary of it and could share with you as well. But I just wanted to hit some highlights. I know I only have 3 minutes, so I'm probably already eating into it. But one of the things that were a few ahas that I wasn't super aware of, I know that workforce development exists throughout our state. However, a person was there representing them and brought into the discussion that they would very much like to be more interactive in our jails, and they would come in and actually facilitate programs of education. And what I thought was really interesting was there was a gentleman there that shared some information, some education statistics, and said someone after they've gone to jail or prison that actually goes and gets their associate's degree only has a 13% chance they end up reoffending. Someone that goes on to get their bachelor degree has a 7% chance of reoffending, and someone that gets their master's has a 0%, based on some research and data that was done on people getting education. So I thought that was pretty big aha that those folks are wanting to partner and come into our jail spaces, because I think today they're doing that maybe in one county, I think maybe Johnson County, but I don't know that it's widespread across the state. And I'm pretty sure we have a workforce development office in our area. Another program is the RSAT, which is the Residential Addiction Recovery Treatment services that are happening in Sevier County. Sevier County has had a lot of success with that program. It's grant funding that occurs, and you have to have 20% of the funds given in the county. But what we understand is that's not cash money. That actually can be like law enforcement type efforts, like personnel and things that go towards that program. And the Department of Finance and Administration is really wanting another county to come on board and do that program. And they were able to share from Sevier County. The sheriff was there, and the jail administrator, and several of the folks that have interacted with that program are singing the praises of how successful that's been, and that they've started to share some of those findings with other counties. Also, that pact that I talked to you about with Jimmy McGill, that Lone Oak County is where they actually have one in place right now, and they're about to do a women's and another, forget the county, apologize, but he was able to share the story of a gentleman that basically was able to tell us that, you know, I didn't go and try to get true help. I really was just in trouble with my charges and was facing actually having to go to prison. And I had this program presented to me, and he said, you could have had somebody with a PhD that knew everything about addiction, or, you know, somebody with a hoity-toity, you know, background that came to me and could tell me this is how you should solve your problem. But he said what really did it for me was I sat across, and this person was genuine and authentic, who had walked the walk that I'd gone through. They had, you know, lost their family. They had gone through addiction and used that to self-medicate. You know, they lost their house. They had nothing. And they were able to really tell me that I came back for them. I'm a homeowner now. I'm married. I have children, and became basically a best friend to this person, and really gave them some positive coping that they're now able to be going on a better walk, and he can reunite with his two daughters that he lost custody of. So it's a real successful program that they have in Lone Oak County, and the Department of Finance Administration really wants somebody else to, other counties to get on board and to do that. So I thought, you know, given that we know the majority of our folks for pretrial are drug charges, and drug court is very successful, maybe an extension of those types of efforts could be something like those programs. It's definitely worth looking into. So I didn't do it justice in this quick summary, but I would love to share with you guys kind of the notes that I have from that. And also, I was so lucky, Beth Koger attended with me, and she took video of the gentleman that did share kind of his experience, and it's powerful. I've shared it with people that I know that are walking this walk, and it was powerful for them. So with permission, we wanted, because they didn't know we videoed it probably, so we want to get their permission. But once we have that, we'd love to share that with you guys. Thank you.
Mac Mayfield from Washington County. I just shouldn't let it go without noting the math that Dr. Edelman presented tonight of 773 board days saved for $7,000. I thought that was pretty remarkable. So thank you all for initiating that program, and I hope that it'll continue. Thanks.